Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us. And welcome to the report launch for UNIDIR's new report, Women Managing Weapons. My name is Hannah Salama, and I'm a researcher with the Gender and Disarmament team here at UNIDIR, which is the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. I co-authored this report that we're launching today, along with Emma Bejerten-Gunther. And so today we are here in the context of the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms, the biennial meeting of states. And during the last meeting of states, the third review conference, states had made commitments towards the full participation and representation of women in policymaking and implementations of arms control. So despite these commitments, which we've been hearing, there hasn't been much data to measure progress against these commitments. And in absence of this data, here at UNIDIR, we've been developing research which asks, where are the women in arms control policy, implementation, and in technical roles? So with this particular piece, we realized that there was a challenge in gathering information and data around women who are involved in technical arms control implementation. And this is because technical and security expertise has been traditionally associated with masculinized norms. The report, Women Managing Weapons, Perspectives for Increasing Women's Participation in Weapons and Ammunition Management, provides knowledge and ideas about women's meaningful participation in WAM. But it does more than that. It seeks to unlock professional opportunities for women working in WAM to transform power and gender relations, not only amongst individuals, but also at a community level and an institutional level, which is really key for achieving true gender equality. Our new studies looked at data from WAM technical training. This data showed us that women are really grossly underrepresented in WAM technical trainings. They represent only, or less actually, than 20% of participants. We also interviewed men and women who were technical arms control specialists and who were working in the area of WAM as stockpile managers, armorers, EODs, and ammunition technical officers. We were particularly interested in women who are doing these roles that have traditionally been seen as a man's job. So through this, we managed to identify what are the current challenges for women entering these fields, what are the opportunities, and what are some of the good practices at an institutional and even on a practical level. The report benefited from interviews with over 35 arms control practitioners, and today's panelists are some of the people who have participated in the research and provided their experiences and their insights. We hope that the findings of this research and the contribution of this discussion can elevate the issue of women's participation in technical roles by providing evidence, knowledge, and ideas for increasing the women's participation and leveling the playing field for women who wish to pursue careers in WAM. The findings and the good practices, which we highlighted in the report, they came from a range of WAM actors. So national actors, international assistance actors, and international organizations. But they're also applicable to other areas of arms control, specifically technical areas, and also the wider security sector. So we will hear about this today as well. To kick off today's event, we have the honor of welcoming Angelica Liao-Moroz of Global Affairs Canada. She will be delivering opening remarks. Canada is a co-sponsor of this event and a supporter of UNIDIR's Gender and Disarmament program, and we're delighted to have Angelica join us today. Angelica is a career diplomat, and from 2018, she has been the director of the Weapons Threat Reduction Program at GAC. It's a $74 million per year program that represents Canada's flagship commitment towards the G7-led global partnership against the spread of weapons and materials of mass destruction. Her remarks will be followed by our diverse and panel of WAM experts, which I'm very excited about today. Afifa Habbassi, who is an explosive hazard technical specialist who has worked at the UN Mine Action Service. Lawrie Clapton, who is the head of weapons and ammunition management at Halo Trust. Afua Lamptey, who is the deputy head of conflict management program at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center based in Ghana. And Boyana Ballon, who is the head of UNDP's Southeastern and Eastern Europe Clearinghouse for the control of small arms and light weapons, which is known for short as CSAC. After the panel discussion, we'll have a dedicated Q&A, and we will close the discussion with some remarks from UNIDIR's director and also international gender champion, Dr. Robin Geis. So about the Q&A, I'd like to invite you to write your questions in the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to write these questions during the event. You don't have to wait till the end. This event will be recorded and will be made available afterwards for you to view and to share. And so before we proceed, I would like to give the floor to Angelica for her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thanks to Renata and Robin for inviting me to be here with you. I'm just delighted, and I really am honored to take part in the launch of what's a really great report. Let me begin with the backdrop provided by the third review conference for the UN Program of Action, which we know made important progress on including strong language on gender in the outcome document. During this conference, states committed to encourage mainstreaming gender considerations into small arms and light weapons policies and programs. Also highlighted was the importance of the full participation and representation of women, including in leadership roles and as agents of change, whether in policymaking, planning, and implementation processes. Yet despite this and other calls by states and civil society for the full and meaningful participation of women in arms control, women remain grossly underrepresented in arms control and disarmament, be it in policy forums or in technical roles. So why is this? The longstanding gender imbalance in this area, as well as the associations between technical expertise and masculinities, has frankly created challenges for women. And this is particularly true in the field of weapons and ammunition management, which I will also start referring to as WAM from now on. I'm Canadian, so we love our acronyms. So to tackle this head on, UNIDIR, I think, sheds really important light on gendered experiences in this area through its new report, which Hannah already talked about, entitled Women Managing Weapons, Perspectives for Increasing Women's Meaningful Participation in WAM. Notably, the report, I think, asks the pointed question, where are the women in weapons and ammunition management? And this may seem like a simple question, but it's not, and it requires quite a bit of unpacking. Many of us here today know that it can be a challenge to find systematic data about women's participation, not only in WAM, but also in the broader security sector across different parts of the world. And by gathering data from specialized trainings and interviews with practitioners, this UNIDIR study provides an overview of women's experiences in WAM technical roles. Delving deeper to unpack social, cultural, institutional, as well as practical challenges shaping the professionalization of women in this field. And it also identifies some really good practices and ideas for increasing women's participation in these technical roles. Among them, practices from different regions of the world to increase women's participation in national security sector institutions, such as eliminating discriminatory policies and practices, adopting gender-sensitive legislation and policies, and conducting targeted recruitment campaigns. And now, if you'll let me just say a few words from Canada's perspective. Canada, for its part, recognizes that it's necessary to implement the gender outcomes agreed to during the third RevCon. And this reflects our ongoing efforts to advance the Women, Peace and Security agenda through all of our diplomatic and programming efforts. Specifically, we're working hard to make sure that gender perspectives are integrated in all efforts along the peace and security spectrum. And so that's why it's crucial that we have diverse participation in our security sector institutions, and why we're committed to improving women's participation and gender equality in our national defense forces and police, et cetera, in line with the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And that's why we need to increase women's participation in WAM technical roles. Through our what's called our Feminist International Assistance Policy, we strive to support the meaningful participation of women in arms control processes, as well as develop best practices and guidance for gender responsive approaches to arms control policy and programming. So as part of this today, I'm super excited to announce a strengthened partnership between the Government of Canada and UNIDIR, with financial support to UNIDIR's Gender and Disarmament program from Canada's Weapons Threat Reduction program, which I manage. And for us today, today's event marks the beginning, I think, of this new partnership. It's an opportunity for us to hear from the women and men working in WAM, and to have a conversation on what works and what doesn't when it comes to improving gender equality in this area. I really hope that this event will spark vigorous conversation as well as collaboration towards greater inclusion between the various WAM actors, whether national institutions, UN, regional, and non-governmental organizations. And finally, let me just say that we are so pleased to see the growing interest in gender equality on the part of all states and civil society participating in this year's UN Program of Action meeting. So with that, thank you so much again, and over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Angelica, for your remarks and for Canada's support and leadership on gender equality, particularly in arms control. So with that, I would like to start the panel portion of our event, and just start by asking a somewhat personal question to Afifa Habbassi. So Afifa, you are a highly trained and experienced EOD specialist. You've worked with the United Nations Mine Action Service in West Africa and in the Middle East, so you have varied experience. And you started your career in the Tunisian military. So I'd like you to tell us a bit about your personal experience working in this exciting field, and also what challenges and opportunities you see from your vantage point as a practitioner for women wanting to enter this field.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. Good morning and afternoon for all. First of all, I'm very delighted to be a part of this event within UNIDIR, and special thanks for Hannah to reach out to me so we can bring to table and discuss about some challenges specifically for women in a warm field. And yes, as far as I know, I am the only Arab and African civilian at the moment, female, who hold an academic degree in weapon techniques, at the same time an EOD qualification according STANAG 2143. So I was the only one in my country, and at least as far as I know, in the 7 countries that I have been supporting in North Africa, West Africa, Central Republic, and African Republic, or in Lebanon or Iraq in Middle East, within national level military or UNMAS or other NGOs that I have been working with. I have filled many positions, WOM officer, ammunition or ATO expert, ammunition technical expert, officers, EOD specialist, stockpile manager, armory manager, or WOM project in some mission. And I'm glad today to share with you some of the challenges that I have faced me personally, or I have touched when I try to support or bring up to the field other female from different countries. So first of the challenges that I have, first of all, was the work-life balance. Some task in the WOM field is rigid. It's not flexible in timing, it's not flexible to plan, because it's not depending about the capacity or capability of the woman or the female expert, if she's how much she knows, and how much she will be available to do the task. It's related to stakeholder, to national authority, to support the support of management teams. So it's a full chain, which make some tasks in WOM field a little bit rigid for female in this field. Second challenge that I have seen common in the majority of the country that I have been in is the family and career balance. And I will call back an example from my national experience. I was fortunate to be one of the 3 female academic WOM officers, which is 20% of all the enrolled candidates in engineering and weapon techniques and WOM officers. But later in the field, after 2 years of work, I was the only female actively working as a WOM or ATU officer. The expectation there was for a female, regardless their technical skills, regardless their knowledge, is to trade to the transition to what it's known by the desk positions. So yes, you can be trained or educated or qualified, but later on the woman, she has to choose between her career or her family, which is a common cultural barrier. It wasn't just in my national level. I found that in some other missions, when I tried to bring in the field some other female colleagues to support, their mainly concern was how to continue with their family. The third challenge that I can see is the unequal opportunity for leadership position with qualified female. I said for leadership position with qualified female. There is a lot of female manager in other fields, but as a technical female who can move forward with her career as a technical expert, there is still the number very, very, very low. And I will call back here an example when I was working within a very very good NGO in Lebanon. I was a PSSM, a technical field manager, supported there for a short period. Again, I filled the position of TFM, but I think I was the only one within the NGO missions as a female who is filling TFM position, technical field position. So still always the number of technical manager as a female very low to compare with male in WOM field. The last challenge that I can see, it's a 2-in-1, is the internal and external opportunity and rewards. There is an equal allocation of resource mentoring, performance mentoring and performance evaluation, like training or teachings. This unequal allocation still existing until today. From my previous experience in Mali and now with the Iraq UNMAS, there is some long strategy for supporting gender, but as I said, it's a male-dominated field and still like a percentage very low. the final, the last and on the final challenge that is the work expectation. Is not an easy field. It needs a lot of knowledge. It needs a lot of times, and within that, we need a higher training level for experts who female or male, and especially female. So we cannot expect higher expectation without providing a strong training or like a very condensed training for those females.
Thank you, Afifa. Really, I think you set the stage here. You've outlined the challenges quite clearly, which we have also highlighted in the report regarding the nature of this work, first of all, which poses a challenge to work-life balance. Also regarding career pathway progression. So because there's just so few females who have the training, it's difficult to see them at leadership positions, particularly at the technical level. And I also really, this is something that the other female technical specialists, which we've interviewed, had echoed, which is being the only woman on the team, and how that can create challenges in terms of acceptance by male peers. And finally, you really touched on an important theme in the report, which is training and the need to sort of have more broadly targeted training and attract more women to these highly technical training. And you also mentioned that you have a background in engineering, and that's already sort of a smaller pool, let's say, of women who are in science and engineering. And so that could be something to explore there about how to bring the pool of women from their university degrees to WAM. So that's very interesting. Thank you, Afifa. And now I'd like to turn the floor to Lawrie, who is the head of weapons and ammunition management of Halo Trust. Halo Trust is an international assistance WAM actor, as we call them at UNIDIR, and they work with national stakeholders to assist in their WAM management and practices. And you, Lawrie, are from the British military, and you have lots of experience in multiple WAM technical areas. So given the challenges that Afifa just set out, I wonder about Halo Trust, and how has your organization tried to ensure gender balance, either with national stakeholders or within your own team?
Thank you very much, Hannah. And thank you for the introduction. So in preparation for this panel, I spoke to a number of women who work for Halo in various WAM implementation roles. As you identified, Halo primarily work in the implementation space, either providing technical assistance to governments or implementing projects on behalf of governments. So most of the women who work in our roles actually do work in implementation roles or in project management type roles, wherein they're still responsible directly for implementation. The biggest, or rather, if I could summarize the two challenges that they felt, which fall very neatly into the same issues that were identified by Afifa. There's practical problems, and then there's cultural problems. The practical problems are that there is simply no access to the kind of technical training required to achieve high levels of competence, or perceived high levels of competence in WAM fields, to become an ATO or an ammunition technical officer, or even to have the kind of EUD experience that's required to be a technical field manager, such as Afifa was. It's very hard to access that training without being ex-military. As we all know, the military don't recruit a lot of women, often for national cultural reasons, and often the reasons that have already been identified. And so that leaves then a very small pool of women who can then be recruited into technical roles in organizations. On the other side, there's the cultural problems also identified, which come down to work-life balance, the perception that technical roles are masculine roles, and other cultural issues associated with sort of workplace discrimination, all of which are very serious. In answer to what I think that can be done about it and what I think Halo are good at doing about this issue, the first one in terms of the practical problems, which I think actually is in many ways the one that is the most tangible, the one that we can actually address, is to break the dependence that we have as a sector upon the military as a hiring pool. We need to be able to then develop our own trainings within the sector, which qualify people who are not ex-military or don't have significant external security experience to be able to be as technically competent to deliver the kind of activities that we deliver. In my opinion, the technical qualifications necessary to deliver 95% of the work that we do in the WAM space can be achieved with trainings that can be delivered in the sector. The last 5%, the last 10% are the sort of things that you would turn to someone with perhaps military experience or with decades of experience in the WAN sector as an ATO or an EOD operator. Whereas that 90% can actually be something that we can train within the sector, and we can develop our own people who don't have to be ex-military. I think that initially would really open up the levels of competence. To just draw a parallel between the other activities that Halo do in demining, Halo, I believe, are the only ones in the sector to run a professional demining qualification course, which runs to 6 months and which essentially qualifies people to, frankly, in my opinion, a higher standard than what you'd see in the military, be able to conduct demining activities. And our trainings for this have been 50% female or even more than 50% female. And so that's allowed women to gain the technical qualifications necessary to be credible and competent in the field. And I believe that as a sector, we should be aiming to do that with WAM also. And that's not just EOD trainings, but that's ammunition technical trainings, and in particular also small arms and light weapon trainings. And I think that's something that is in reach. It requires funding. It requires, I think, patience from the donor community who have to understand that we can't necessarily simply pull from a batch of already qualified women. We do need to develop our own, and it takes time and it takes dedication. I believe that Halo, this is the direction that Halo is going down, and as head of WAM, it's something that I'm trying to take forwards with the women who are in the organization, start delivering our own sort of technical qualifications for all of our staff who are not ex-military and don't have that kind of experience. Currently, just to give you an example, from the Northern Triangle, we have a number of project managers there who are women, and they work every day with the stakeholders at a national level to ensure that every training has women in it. Now, whether that is as stockpile managers or indeed to qualify them to an ANAF level 3 EOD, they have to face the cultural factors, which limit the number of women that the national authority will even put forward for those courses. But every day, when they get a list of trainees and that list is all men, they turn around and they go back to the national authority and they say, no, there needs to be women on this list. And that effort has paid dividends. Just hearing then from the project manager in El Salvador that the Minister of Defense has started to take that up personally and has been unilaterally demanding that women have spaces on the technical trainings that Halo provide to the military. So just to summarize then those points, I think it's a problem that is practical, that we can do something about, and it requires breaking that dependence upon military recruiting pools and developing our own sector trainings. And I believe it's something that we can already do at a national level by ensuring that women are in place in project manager type roles and able to enact that change for our own trainings as we then develop our own trainings for our international staff. So I'll just conclude there and say thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of the discussions.
Thank you, Lawrie. Really, you've touched on lots of important points here that have been also mentioned in the report. Particularly, as you say, we did identify that the non-military pool or the civilian pool as a key opportunity for increasing women's participation in the WAM field, as well as organization providing on the job trainings. I think the example from the mine action field is very relevant, and that there is definitely some lessons to be learned. And I also wonder why, you know, WAM is a little bit behind on that. But seeing as weapons and ammunition management encompasses sort of many functional areas, it's kind of still being professionalized, let's say, as a field, as a coherent field. And again, the cultural factors are really important, and something that we heard from a lot of women and men who were working with international assistance actors, WAM international assistance actors, and something that they've said is that sometimes there's just not a lot of scope to change the culture where you're working in, and that's like a sort of a balancing act that you have to do as a international assistance actor working in a quite closed cultural space, let's say. And I think this really leads us to a good discussion about trainings. And Afua, you are the deputy head of the conflict management program, again at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. And you yourself are a trainer, and you've delivered many technical trainings in WAM, including on physical security and stockpile management. So from your perspective, you know, as a trainer working in the ECOWAS region, why have there been so few women who participate in WAM technical trainings? And what can training institutions like the Kofi Annan Training Center do to attract more women to these trainings or increase their participation?
Okay, thank you very much, Hannah, for the opportunity, and congratulations on the book to you and Emma. Okay, so much of the factors that inhibit women from participating in training has been mentioned already, and that is cultural. And in that sense, historically, we know and can see that gender roles have defined women as the nurturers, the caretakers, those that give life, and the men as those that, you know, protect, those that go out there, those that handle the arms. And so the very idea of women taking up arms and taking life is a bit problematic, you know, for society. And that is why many women have been socialized in that context, that they don't partake in the heavier side of the issues that are at stake there, but they take more softer and feminine roles. And that is regardless of the fact that even in our past, we've had women, for instance, in Ghana, we had the Yasantua who took up arms and led the whole Ashanti kingdom, you know, to fight off the British imperialism. We've had women in the past who have gone against the status quo, but that has not really translated into women participating in weapons and ammunition management to date. And so at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, since 2008, we are an accredited center of excellence for ECOWAS, and we train about over 1,005 personnel in small arms and light weapons proliferation. So we focused on stockpile management, we focused on marking and tracing of weapons, and then also border security. Those are the specialized areas. And out of the over 1,500 people that we train, both in Accra and in almost all the 15 countries of ECOWAS, we could see just about a 14% representation of women in the training personnel. And it's not from lack of trying. When we send the letters, we do state that attention should be paid to gender. And when that was not done, we then said, please bring, in the cases where they offer two positions, we would say, please bring one female and one male. But still, the people who were nominated would come back and tell us, we only can give you what we have available, and the women are simply not there. And so it goes back to another critical point, that is the policies. What kind of policies are in place to enable the women to be able to take part in these weapon and ammunition management? And I give a typical example. If you look at the Ghana Armed Forces regulation in Ghana, for instance, when you join the army as a new recruit, you are not allowed to marry for the next 3 years. And that is the same thing that is pervasive in the West African sub-region. And so for a man, he can go ahead and have a child, or with another woman, nobody will see, but the woman, by getting pregnant, will automatically be asked to go out of the military. And further, there's a rule that says that a female personnel married to a civilian would have to continue to live in single quarters, irrespective of rank. Of course, now the Army is taking steps to review their laws, which dates back to the 1960s. They started in 2018 and is still ongoing. And we must also know that the security sector is clearly hierarchical and highly patriarchal, and most of the policies that have been set up to date favor the men. And so they are the ones who determine the nature of the policies. And so all the policies that they would put in place would go for them. For instance, in Ghana, it's only in 2016 that we had our first brigadier general, and the things are changing slowly. For instance, also, there has been the appointment of gender advisors in both Nigeria and Ghana, and it's a really big plus for the military because they have been able to bring together the generals, brigadier generals, and co, and then also to be able to sensitize them on the importance of gender mainstreaming, because if those at the top don't understand the concept and what goes into it, then it clearly becomes very, very difficult for them to be able to enact the policies. And so following the gender advisors establishment in Ghana, they have posted one woman to the base army ordinance, and that's the first that it's ever happened. Most of the people there are men, those who take care of the weapons in the armories. The women are just the storekeepers. They just take notes of who takes what and who when they bring it in. And I think we have seen a gradual shift now. And it also speaks to the fact that if you have male collaborators who are sympathetic to the cause of gender, it is a very good thing to do, because the past CDS, Chief of Defense Staff of Ghana, was very sympathetic to gender issues. And so it enabled an environment for the gender advisors to step in and to allow these policies to be made. And to date, even though the Army has about 17% gender representation, the gender focal persons, there are more men. The men are 55% and the women are 45%. So it shows that gradually there's some kind of change or shift in the status quo. What can training institutions do? I think we will continue to advocate for more women to be, included in the security sector. We'll continue to do research, cutting-edge research that would enable policies to be made. We'll continue to target more women, for instance, specialized training courses that will target only women, for instance, in that section. And then we'll continue to draw attention to a lot of these gaps and biases in the training that we organize. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Afua, and thank you for sharing some of the good practices in Ghana and some of the challenges that have faced women historically entering security sector roles and entering the military or the police. I think with regards to training, you mentioned something really important, which is to encourage and ask for more women from the military to these more technical roles, and also to follow up with them to see how has this training actually impacted their career pathway. And that's something that we have highlighted in the report, which is the importance of following up with the women themselves who have taken the training, and ensuring that, as Afifa said, they don't end up in desk roles just because that's the assumption that they will do that. So looking forward to also discussing that a little bit further in our discussion. And I think your intervention also goes nicely with Boyana, so I will, Boyana, you are the head of the UNDP CSAC, and you've also previously coordinated CSAC's activities on gender mainstreaming in the security sector, both the Women Police Officers Network and the Gender Equality in the Military project, which you helped develop and we've heard a little bit about gender mainstreaming in the military from Afua. And I wonder, from your experience in the Southeast Europe region, and can you tell us what works and what doesn't work with regards to gender mainstreaming and increasing women's participation in the security sector as a whole?
Hannah, thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Yes, okay, perfect. So thank you for the invitation to speak in the event, and congratulations for the launch of the report. We were very happy that we were also able to share some of the good lessons from Southeast Europe also, and they're also reflected in your study. And I wanted also to thank Afifa, Lawrie, and Afua for their contributions and sharing of their experiences. Now, just before responding to your questions, let me just very briefly provide some background on the initiative that I represent here today and how it is relevant for this event. Namely, CSAC was established 2 decades ago by governments in Southeast Europe and United Nations Development Programme, primarily to support small arms and light weapons control efforts in a post-conflict region. But in the last decade, we were increasingly requested by the governments in the region to support them also in advancing gender equality in the security sector. In this context, we worked very closely with police chiefs in 9 countries in Southeast Europe in establishing a women police officers network, developed guidelines and capacity development activities to advance gender equality in policing. In parallel to this, we are implementing a regional project with 4 ministries of defense and armed forces in Southeast Europe, supporting the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda and advancing gender equality in defense. And apart from these 2 gender-specific initiatives, we have also pioneered the mainstreaming of gender perspective in small arms and light weapons control. And for many, the Southeast Europe is considered as a front runner in terms of the integration of gender perspective in the security sector. Now, one thing I wanted to mention in the very beginning related to weapons and ammunition management is that we need to keep in mind, and that was also mentioned in the study, as well as by Afifa also just now, is that weapons and ammunition management belong to the so-called technical professions. And we see that women in general are less inclined to choose these professions. So in order to have more diversity in these professions, gender stereotypes need to be challenged from a very early age. But since we work with the security sector institutions, let me say a few words on what has worked in advancing gender equality in these institutions in Southeast Europe. And I would like to also take this opportunity to thank our partners and the institutions in the region for the excellent cooperation. And I'm sure many of them are also listening to this event today. So basically, what works? From our perspective, only a long-term and a holistic approach can work. Gender equality is a developmental issue, and as such, it requires a long-term approach. In our case, the work in Southeast Europe on gender equality in the security sector is ongoing since 2009 and has been possible due to the continuous support from the donors, the European Union, Norway, Sweden, Slovakia, and I would like to thank them for this continuous support. Second of all, what really matters is political or high-level political support. It is crucial. Our work in Southeast Europe was made possible in the context of the Women, Peace and Security resolutions. They gave the framework and the political pressure on the governments in the region to advance on topics related to women, peace and security. Our work with women police officers in the region was made possible as the police chiefs understood that they need to address the gender inequality, and they requested our assistance and support in advancing gender equality in policing. Likewise, there was high-level support within ministries of defense for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security resolutions. The 4 ministries even signed a joint statement that they will jointly work on this topic. The third thing that works, in particular in Southeast Europe, is the regional approach. This was instrumental for success in this area. The Women Police Officers Network, the regional network of gender trainers in the military, the regional platform of gender equality mechanisms, decision makers and commanders enable information sharing, learning from each other, and also planning of joint activities. There's also a healthy dose of competition present that also helps move things forward. And what is also a precondition for things to work is the importance that partners in institutions or that the beneficiaries clearly understand what is the added value of gender mainstreaming to their work and how they can practically do it through their day-to-day work. They need to understand how the gender perspective will advance their work. For example, someone managing human resources in defense will be better able to plan retention and professional development measures for staff if he or she is able to apply gender analysis, if he or she understands what are the challenges that women and men face in the profession, or why do they leave it. In mainstreaming gender equality, it is also very important to say one can never only rely on one strategy. And I will now speak very briefly about some of the strategies that we have used in Southeast Europe. First of all, it is important to work on increasing the knowledge and expertise on gender insecurity. In Southeast Europe, the approach to gender mainstreaming has always been data-driven and evidence-based. A lot of research was conducted on status of women in police, the armed forces, on the gendered aspects of small arms and light weapons control. And this is what produced a solid base of knowledge, which enabled us to identify problems and to come up with adequate strategies to address them. For example, only when looking at sex of perpetrators and victims in different types of cases of misuse of firearms, one can understand the dynamics of misuse of firearms and better plan strategies to mitigate them. Look at the vulnerability of women in domestic violence, the vulnerability of young men in criminal context, the use of firearms in suicides. Data and research is crucial to make a strong case for gender equality in security sector and get institutions on board. Second of all, it is important to work on increasing capacities of institutions to mainstream gender perspective. CSAC has been using a combination of capacity building techniques to ensure that institutions are well equipped to integrate the gender perspective in their work. And this includes gender trainings, trainings that are tailor-made, needs-based, practical. They're important for establishing consensus among stakeholders on the importance of gender equality and understanding of how to advance it. Gender coach program for high-ranking decision makers in security sector institutions. We've implemented several such gender coach programs to increase their understanding of relevance of gender equality and how to practically integrate it in their work. Decision makers are usually worried that advancing gender equality will bring them more work. But what they need to understand is actually how integrating the gender perspective will advance their work and performance. We were always also providing on-demand consultative support to institutions. One needs to be able to provide advice to institutions to their ad hoc requests. Support needs to be provided when needed, and it needs to be tailor-made. Copy-pasting of solutions from elsewhere will simply not work. Third of all, what is important is to work on increasing awareness on gender equality within the institutions. I will just mention one example of the work done here in Southeast Europe, and that is the regional network of gender trainers in the Ministries of Defense and Armed Forces in the Western Balkans. Most members of this gender network are actually officers, most of them are men, who in the period from between 2014 and 2016 delivered gender courses and briefings to more than 4,700 personnel in the armed forces in the region. We understand, namely, that changing the mindset and attitudes is an important precondition for challenging the stereotypes and advancement of gender equality. An important strategy also is to work on increasing women's participation, supporting women's networking and enhancing their agency. Women police officers networks in Southeast Europe are examples for this. Women in police have established women police officers networks, which are genuine agents of change and promote gender equality within the institution, and also prioritizing specific issues such as domestic and gender-based violence when it comes to police services. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, women police officers networks are increasingly getting involved also in small arms and light weapons control and raising awareness in their communities about risks related to firearms misuse. What is also important is to build on knowledge and expertise and experiences of women from the security sector. This was, for an example for this is are the guidelines on gender-sensitive policing that we have developed together with women police officers in Southeast Europe that envisage low-cost measures for simple and low-cost measures for the advancement of gender equality in policing. What is also important is to promote the balanced representation and full participation of women in different activities, events, high-level events, capacity building activities. And in particular here, I would like to mention also tailor-made support for women to attend professional development courses that help build their skills and knowledge. Courses that would help their professional development, which is also a good strategy to further strengthen the capacities of women in weapons and ammunition management, and also something that we have been supporting here in Southeast Europe, and supporting the participation of women officers in such courses. I have mentioned several examples of what has worked, but the question is, how do we know that these strategies have actually worked? Well, let me mention just one example of progress in advancement of gender equality in our region, namely since 2012, when we first started supporting the Ministries of Defense and the Armed Forces in advancing gender equality, the representation of women in the armed forces almost doubled. In 2012, women made up between 3 and 6% in the armed forces in the Western Balkans, while in 2019, the representation of women ranged between 6 and 9%. This is only one example of a strong sign of commitment of the institutions to advance diversity and gender equality. And I will just conclude by also highlighting very quickly about what does not work from our experience. I think this is also very useful. From our perspective, quick fixes do not work. Since the structure which generates and reproduces inequalities, they are deeply embedded in societies. Institutions and security sector as well are such that reproduce the gender stereotypes that are valid also in the generally in the society, and one has to work in a systematic and long-term manner to properly address them. Also, what does not work is relying only on a single strategy. One strategy cannot really produce change. It can produce some small wins, but cannot actually produce any type of long-term meaningful change. And also what does not work is copying solutions. What is needed is really what the institutions need is assistance that is contextual and relevant for their context and the environment. So Hannah, this is very quickly from my side, but I'm available for any other questions also or comments.
Thank you, Bojana, and thank you so much for your contribution and your remarks. I mean, I appreciate your honesty about what doesn't work. And so, you know, we all have to learn from what doesn't work and from our mistakes. And what I hear from you here, and what we highlighted in the report as well, and what Afua also mentioned, is that institutions have to be on board. High level support is necessary, and specifically the sort of he for she campaign. So the male collaborators, male supporters need to understand the value of gender mainstreaming in the institutions and need to be supportive. And this was also at a personal level with a lot of the women we interviewed who are working in WAM. They valued support of their male peers, and that's what sort of also encouraged them to keep going in a sense. So that's really, really important. So at this point in the discussion, I would like to invite our colleagues from the UN to comment on the discussion. Here with us, we have Nora Al-Gayer, who works on DDR and gender. And yeah, Nora, if you're able to reflect on what was said today, it's particularly in terms of the relevance of this discussion and the research to sort of wider UN gender mainstreaming in the security sector.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Nora Al-Gayer, and I'm managing a joint project between the Department of Peace Operations and the Office for Disarmament Affairs on effective weapon and ammunition management in DDR settings. So I would like to first congratulate UNIDIR for this important research and for the launch of the study, and really thank all the panelists for the open and insightful reflections and the sharing of experiences. It's a lot. I think it's really crucial to identify the challenges that women face when working and participating in the field of WAM in order to address them. And so from our experience in implementing the joint initiative between DPO and ODA on WAM, we have seen that women are often much more represented in the programming on WAM, which shows that there is much interest. They are taking up much less the technical roles. So the report really helps us to identify why is that and what can be done. And what I've heard from interventions from Afifa, Lawrie, and Afua, there is a strong need technical training opportunities for women on WAM outside of the military. And I think it's really here where we as the UN, we need to commit more prominently to gender diversity and also to diversity when we are developing and conducting WAM training courses. And so when maybe just from our project experience, while we are implementing the DPO and ODA project, we have also faced challenges related to gender diversity, notably when we are established a WAM and DDR roster of experts, and when we are implementing our annual training course for DDR practitioners on weapons and ammunition management. And so, for instance, out of the 82 experts that we have on our roster of experts, only 6. I think there's much room for improvement, and I think will help us in that. And also seeing in the profile of these women expert roster, it is that they are most likely to focus on policy aspects rather than that they have a technical background. So that really much falls into what colleagues have been saying here, but maybe to say how we are trying to promote gender diversity within the project is that we are developing specific guidance on weapons and ammunition management in DDR that is gender mainstream. So for instance, we have just released our practical handbook, the 2nd edition of it, which contains gender responsive guidance for DDR practitioners on WAM. But I think, there's more that we can do, especially with regards to the practical challenges that also Lawrie described, and there's a need for investing additional efforts in terms of time and resources to promote women's participation in opportunities of training, but also professional engagement on DDR-related WAM. So we would be delighted to work with UNIDIR further to explore how some of the good practices that you identified in the study can also be promoted in DDR settings, in peace operations, and can be implemented through the DPO and ODA project. And from our perspective, it would also be very interesting to undertake further targeted research on women's participation in WAM, in peace operations context, and in the context of DDR settings. So that we really can identify the challenges in these particular contexts, and that those can then hopefully subsequently addressed through specific projects like the one on WAM in DDR that we are implementing. So we look forward to further collaboration with UNIDIR on this, and many thanks for inviting us to this fruitful exchange. It was really a pleasure. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you, Nora. And as you say, there is interest by women in WAM areas. So this is why we're all here. And at this point, I'd also like to bring in my co-author for her reflections about the report and the discussion so far. So Emma, you have the floor.
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, my name is Emma Manon, resident researcher with the Gender and Disarmament program at UNIDIR. And I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank the panelists for sharing the valuable thoughts and experiences regarding this topic. And I know that a lot of what has been said so far also has been confirmed and addressed in the interviews that we conducted for this report. And what you touched upon here today also emphasizes, I think, the need to move away from this misguided idea that the underrepresentation of women is a women's issue, and we have to see this as an issue that concerns everyone. And like you already mentioned, this requires a transformative change of the organizational culture, and we also seen examples on how this actually can work in practice. I really like the discussion you had on the practical versus the cultural factors. And in the interviews that we conducted, people also addressed that in the field of WAM is not only male dominant, not only in terms of the gender composition, but also in its perceptions of technical expertise associated with ideas of masculinity that some of you also addressed. And some mentioned also that the military nature of the field is being an obstacle for women's participation, leading to gender stereotypes that we already heard here today. So I actually have a question for the panelists. You already touched upon a little bit on this, but I wonder if you have any recommendations or ideas on how we can overcome these ideas about security that sometimes are deeply rooted and also a little bit harder to grasp, that creates obstacles for women's participation, how we can deal with this at an institutional level. And Bojana, you mentioned this a little bit, but maybe you could develop how you've been addressing this in your work. Yeah, that's a question for me, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma. So would Bojana like to start on this question, and we can move to every panelist for a reaction?
Could I ask Emma just to repeat the last question, because I did not hear it very well. I'm sorry for this.
Oh yeah, no, how, if you have any recommendations or ideas, how you've been working with dealing with this more, the cultural factors, like the challenges when it comes the militarization of the field, basically, and these perceptions of technical expertise associated with masculinity.
Yes, I think that a good example here is the work done by the regional network of gender trainers in the armed forces. One of the preconditions for advancing gender equality in the armed forces in the region has been to actually increase the awareness and battle the gender stereotypes and attitudes. And we have partnered and worked very closely with the Nordic Center for Gender and Military Operations. And we have developed twice gender training of trainers course for the military officers here in the Western Balkans. And out of that training of trainers courses, a regional network was created that we have and are still continuously supporting. Providing additional training, as well as facilitating the regional exchanges and meetings where the trainers get together and learn from each other. What we have seen is that it is very important that it's personnel from the inside that actually talks to the colleagues about the gender stereotypes, about the gender equality. Unfortunately, it is the case also that if it comes from a man to other men, it is also regarded or received differently, or if it is a woman that is actually promoting and delivering training on gender equality. We have seen that trainings delivered by personnel from within the armed forces to their colleagues is much more valuable, because these are people who understand the mindset. They know, they speak the language, they know how they can actually address and convince colleagues within the armed forces with some concrete recommendations and examples that are to portray how gender stereotypes are basically not and harming them as an institution as well as the society. So this is one example that I would really like to highlight here, because I think it's quite unique that we would have a network of gender trainers from the armed forces from 4 different countries actually working together and sharing experiences, learning from each other, and also promoting gender equality within their armed forces.
Thank you, Bojana. Can I go to Afifa on this question? You know, specifically because I know you've been training women in Lebanon and in other countries where there are rigid sort of gender norms. how would you address this issue of the portrayal of WAM as a sort of a man's job?
Thank you, Hannah. I have been training women in Mali and in Tunisia back, and in Nepal, and in Lebanon I was a TFM. So just for the information. So I think that to work to attract or to solve these challenges within WAM actors supporting national authorities, we should tackle these issues from first of all the education and training intervention in order to improve recruitment. So recruiting and retaining more women in WAM will require changes to the status of training, in both ways. Women will be taught, and the opportunity that they will have later within the organization once they finish their career, their training, sorry. When I say training, I mean the active training in classroom and also in scenario is a real field within like the magazine, within ammunition depot, within supporting military expert in this WAM field. Second, I think that we can, it's very important to support the national authority, military or police in creating the role model for both male and female. The importance of creating the role model is to communicate to the national stakeholder the social and humanitarian impact of female experts. Like, for example, in some countries, as some of colleagues mentioned, women cannot be, by cultural reason, cannot be trained except by women. So if you have a team or a role model from the same military group or same national authorities, mixed women and men, and they are present a role model for their teams, that will support very well. Two last things is the group composition of WAM expert pool may also play an importance in recruiting and retaining women. For instance, female candidates will feel more comfortable, and it will enhance their interest to be in this field when there is a female technician recruiter in the pool. And I have experienced this in Bangui within UNMAS, when we were trying to support the national capacity to come in the WAM field. They were like a colleague, a female colleague who is a mother of 2 kids, and and she was interested in WAM field, and she was working in UNMAS for like 6-7 years there. But once I was in the pool, it encouraged her for the last year to apply and go through this training of WAM. So having a mixed pool of experts, male and female, will encourage the female in this field. And finally, I believe that male allies is has a big importance to further alleviate the heavy service expectation for women in WAM experts. It's critical that male professionals play an active role in changing the work environment. And I will give 2 different examples that I have been living in person. I was WAM officer in national level and requested once to go in UN mission as a WAM officer. So my supervisor at that time, he answered me, he said, "Don't forget that you are a woman and that's not a field for women. Stay here, do your job here." From the other side, in 2018, I had another colleague within UNMAS Mali when I was filling the position of WAM expert in DDR process. He was dealing with me professionally without gender biases. So he gave me the atmosphere to do my job, and he supported me to do my job and my task as a WAM expert in DDR. And here two things, two different, So it's important to have a male allies in your environment in order to move forward with the WAM your career in WAM field. I hope that I answered the question.
Yeah, I think you've answered it very well. And can I go to Lawrie on any reflections on this question?
I mean, I think the question's already been very well answered by the previous panelists. I think, I think if I could add one thing, it would be that the notion basically that in order for the culture to change and for there to be practical solutions, there needs to be more women in these roles in the first place, I think is incredibly important. There's no way for us to turn back the clock 10, 20 years and ensure that the military have enough candidates who are women in technical roles to then produce the change that we want to see in our sector. So the time really has to then be now. I think that Jana really lined a great thing, which is encouraging national militaries to start recruiting women in a sort of gender balanced sense. And to recognize that I think WAM actually is an area that you can make a great deal of progress in the security sector in gender balance. It's something that we found in our trainings. It's not necessarily a role that's going to be at the forefront of conflict. It's not a role that people are expecting to be shot at in or to do shooting in, which is often the greatest barrier that you get, I find, when you're training national militaries and police. They won't accept women for trainings which maybe expose them to quote unquote danger, etc., just due to sort of national prejudices. Which means that WAM is an area where really there's a great deal of progress that can be made. And often with the right amount of framing of the problem to national militaries when you conduct training, and how important it is to have this representation, it's an area where progress can be made. So yeah, that's all I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrie. And now I encourage our attendees to put their questions in the Q&A box. And if you don't know where that is, it's just at the bottom of your screen, a little icon with it says Q&A. We already have a number of questions here and some comments as well. And there's an interesting question here about what are the kinds of discriminatory policies and attitudes that needs to change to improve gender equalities in this field. And I think that goes for all of the panelists. So we can start with Bojana again, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it was Manu who asked this question. To offer one recommendation from my side, one measure to break the cultural barriers, I think it's important to start promoting parenting and not only work-life balance for women, as basically both parents should have equal obligations with regards to childcare. And I think as long as when we talk about work-life balance, as long as we keep talking about women who need work-life balance, women will always be in a less favorable position. So this would be my small recommendation.
That's right, and I agree with you. And Afifa, would you like to maybe come in on this in terms of discriminatory attitudes that you faced and what needs to change with that?
Yes, thank you, Hannah. As I mentioned, it's a little bit hard to face the whole culture of whole countries, but as I said, a male ally will be like, when you face this kind of it's individual, it's not representing all the team. So when you have he or she in management, and for sure there is I'm pretty sure there is a lot of supporting male colleague who will make the task a little bit easier for female technicians. So I come back to my same answer. It's the male colleague supporting.
Great. And slightly different question to Lawrie, but also based on our colleague Manu's question. Is there any policy that you're particularly proud of at Halo Trust, or HR policy or other, or any initiative which promotes a gender equality?
I think there's been a great deal of effort from our organization to try and achieve gender parity in all trainings. It's something that we follow in sort of all aspects of our implementation. But we're in a position now where we have more and more women working in WAM roles. And, you know, as the other panelists have identified, when you have women working in WAM roles, they're able to push forward and provide a role model for when you train national authorities, or even when you train your own national staff. It creates a very clear example of a woman who's able to work in this space competently. And we're now at the point where I think there's as many female WAM project managers or sort of practitioners, if you will, in Halo as there are male ones. Certainly it's not necessarily represented at a technical level for all the reasons we've identified in this panel, but certainly at project manager implementation level, I think we're starting to achieve a gender parity, which I think is something to be proud of.
You're muted, Hannah.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I was just looking through the questions, and an interesting one perhaps, which is for WAM female professionals themselves. What is your motivation for working in this sector to become a technical field manager? Is it financial career development? And what factors would be helpful for recruitment from the civilian pool? So Afifa, would you like to take the motivation question?
Okay. Yes, as Ms. Biona mentioned earlier, we have to think about early age plan in life and education. And then in my early age, I was like very interested to ammo and ammunition and weapon techniques, and I joined the military specifically to get this this qualification. So I love my field where I'm working. So it's personal, challenging. It's unique in my back in my country home. No other woman in my country home have done this. So that's a personal challenging that I targeted since the age of 18. So regarding the opportunities in life and development in career, as in any one of us, I failed a lot, I succeeded a few times. So every time there is nothing easy. So we can try always and always, but we can achieve our goals. So regarding policy, I'm not really the well placed to talk about policy, but regarding motivation, it's a personal and unique field that I have chosen early in my age before. Thank you.
Thank you, Afifa. And I have a question about the role of donors. And I wonder if, Afua, if you're still with us, can you please let us know, what do you think is the role of donors in all this, in increasing women's participation in technical arms control?
All right, yes. So I think that donors have a very key role to play in this regard. For instance, since 2008, we have had the opportunity of having Japan, sponsor quite a lot of the programs that we have done. And if you look at the West African sub-region, we are the only training institution that was given that training in weapons and ammunition management, and also small arms and light weapons proliferation. So the role of donors is very key and very critical, because once the funds dry up, then there's no more training. And if you go into the countries in the sub-region, there's quite a need. If you talk to the operators, those that are the front lines, those that are in the state armories, etc., there's always the need for more of such training, because there's, people have established national commissions on small arms and light weapons, and they've thrown in a mix of agencies who have no idea at all what they're talking about or what they're dealing with. So donors are very key and critical to this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Afua. And I wonder, Boyana, if you can weigh in on this, the role of donors.
Yes, actually, the role of donors is really crucial from two aspects. So first of all, the donors can condition the financial support with clear objectives related to gender equality. That is very important, and we've seen in the past that this has worked very well. And second of all, donors, they need to understand that the long-term approaches are needed, so that they as donors do not expect results overnight. I think we all need to be very realistic and really understand the importance of a comprehensive and systematic and long-term approach. And for this, donors are really crucial.
Thank you, Bojana. And we have a little follow-up question here, perhaps the last one, or get your questions in quickly, about women who are interested in this field and who don't have a military background. What would be your recommendation, the panel's recommendation on pursuing a career in WAM? And I will go with Lawrie first, and then Afifa on this one.
That's a great question. Other than finding an implementation organization such as HALO or indeed MAG or other organizations which offer roles to civilian operators that have other experience, and short of simply joining the military and then going on a very, very clear path to get your technical qualification, then I think honestly there's a great deal of grounding that can be done in achieving awareness of the importance of arms control, security issues and global security challenges from an academic point of view, because it's something that in the field I think is under regarded, how important it is to be able to understand why we do what we do, the impact that it has, and those other aspects, those I think expression might be soft skills, which are actually incredibly important for implementing WAM. If I was to choose personally between a very good technical expert who had no social skills or competence, and from a political point of view or for understanding complex stakeholder management, and someone who understood stakeholder management and was very good at achieving projects, but had limited technical knowledge, I would actually, most of the time for an implementer, choose the person with the limited technical knowledge, but the great deal of sort of political acumen or ability to actually get things done. Because you can always support someone with the right technical experience, but you can't necessarily teach those soft skills or those more broad academic skills. So that would be my suggestion.
That's a great suggestion. And Afifa, the question was, if you don't have a military background, how can you break into this field?
I will build from, thank you. I will build from what Lawrie started. It's recommended to join an implementing partner or join UNMAS or any WAM actor on the field, because I know and I'm sure there is a lot of long-term project for national development of national capacity in WAM field. And like for example, in Central African Republic, there in every training for militaries UNMAS was providing, there is always 2 or 3 from UNMAS personnel in the training as a trainee. So UNMAS was providing the technical support and also was including our team who are not qualified, who are coming from, are not coming from military background in those trainings, so they get qualified. Yes, there is certain specific knowledge cannot be taught in 2 or 3 weeks, but there is development and progress in career within UN actors or our UN implementing partners.
Thank you, Afifa, and thank you to all the panelists for your valuable contributions and your insights. I think we have covered a lot of ground today, a lot of practical advice, personal experience and institutional experience, which really has come together nicely. And thank you to the audience for their engagement as well. And right now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Robin Geis, the Director of UNIDIR and also an international gender champion, for his concluding remarks. Robin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you all for your engaging, rich and insightful discussion today. Great questions, great answers. I won't even attempt to sum it all up now, also looking at the clock here, but I do want to share some brief concluding reflections on the basis of what we've heard today. I think the last question really has just made it clear there is a growing number of women interested in developing expertise, pursuing careers in technical arms control, including in weapons and ammunition management. But we've also heard, and I think Angelica already in her opening statement said as much, there are long-standing gender imbalances in this area. There are entrenched associations of technical expertise and masculinities, and they're creating challenges for women working in the field, and of course for women who want to enter the field anew. So in the interviews conducted by UNIDIR for this report, and Afifa also confirmed it today in her intervention, it was not uncommon to hear from technical specialists that they were the only woman in their unit within their national military. And as a result, women often have to deal with gender stereotypes that limit the range of possibilities and hinder professional advancement. And they're facing other obstacles that include discriminatory attitudes and policies, lack of adequate infrastructure, unequal access to training. And I think the importance of training in particular has been highlighted over and over again today. But importantly, we also saw practitioners sharing positive experiences regarding good practices being implemented to promote gender equality. And these include adjusting legislation, eliminating discriminatory policies for sure, but also transforming organizational cultures, offering gender trainings and coaching programs, reviewing recruitment processes to broaden the pool of candidates, making women professionals visible in their professional roles in communication strategies and in the media, engaging men in gender equality programs, again, that was highlighted repeatedly today. And then, of course, the importance of donors that are driving change through capacity building and related initiatives, and that was also mentioned repeatedly. Above all, and I think this is the central takeaway from today's discussion and from the report, I think it's safe to say that we're seeing a consensus emerge among arms control actors, as all practitioners that were interviewed for the study agreed that WAM would be strengthened and more effective by the inclusion of more women and people of different backgrounds, disciplines, and career tracks. So diversity clearly is seen as a key to success here. And the message is clear: the more diverse the arms control field is, the stronger the field is. Now, the challenge, I think, for all of us will be to go beyond these perhaps obvious slogans, to take concrete steps. Creating a level playing field is not only the right thing to do, it is a smart thing to do, as more diversity in arms control can strengthen not only the effectiveness of arms control, but will create more employment opportunities for women in this area, and this will positively impact their own lives and the quality of life in their communities. Now, UNIDIR will continue to explore these avenues, will continue to explore and identify concrete steps towards these ends, concrete avenues that can improve women's participation and increase diversity in all aspects of arms control and disarmament. And we warmly invite all of you to follow our work, to reach out if you want to discuss the findings of today's report further, or if you would like to propose research partnerships and ideas for collaboration in this area. Now, before we conclude, I would first of all like to thank all the panelists who joined us from different parts of the world today. Thank you all very much. I would also like to convey special thanks to our organizing partner, the Government of Canada. Like Angelica, I'm super excited about this new collaboration, and I'm certain that today's event is just the beginning of a renewed and strengthened partnership between UNIDIR and Canada. Additionally, I would like to thank and express our gratitude to the governments of Germany, Ireland, Norway, Spain, Sweden, and the United Kingdom for supporting UNIDIR's work on gender and disarmament generally. And finally, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today and participated in the discussion. Thank you all very much. I wish everyone a good day, a good afternoon, a good evening, depending on where you are. And with this, back over to Hannah, who will close the event. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, Robin, and thank you to all our panelists again, and the Government of Canada as our co-sponsor. We hope that you have the link to the report, which is in the chat. So it's been launched today, and feel free to share it widely, and we look forward to your feedback on this, and have a good rest of your day, everyone.